Well, first of all, I am, every day I walk into our building, I am still as honored as when I was selected to be the president. I know that sounds corny. However, it's truly what I believe. And I think that I came into the particular organization of the foundation at a very good time. And we were just on the cusp, the whole field of, boy, this could really go places. So, and to go places, we really needed to band together with what I would say very influential organizations. The Council of Michigan Foundations, the Council of Michigan Foundations was the first stop for me, outside of figuring out who's to who and what's going on in the office and everything. And the Community Foundation has been a member of the Council of Michigan Foundation since its inception. And at that time, prior to the Community Foundation services specifically being organized, there was a strong core of Community Foundation leaders that would meet periodically with the wonderful guidance of Dottie Johnson. And so that was a good place of sharing knowledge and sharing concerns, but also building the capital, if you will, for being able to do things together. When, along the way, the Johnson Center being created, wow, that was started actually sitting on the board of a organization that's no longer in existence called Direction Center. And by design, there were 2 representatives from the Community Foundation, 2 representatives from the United Way here in the area, Grand Valley State University, and I'm forgetting that's it, I think, United Way, but anyway. And Joel and Russ were the instigators, if you will, around the necessity of having a more focused look at philanthropy as a whole in the state, but through a university. Thus gave birth to what we now know as the Dorothy A. Johnson Center on Philanthropy. You know, the Michigan Community Service Commission, my involvement with that in the beginning had a lot to do with CMF, and in regard to a youth program as well. And that's when I first met Kyle Caldwell, and working in that regard. I've never been on the board nor really deeply involved with the Michigan Community Service Commission, but I certainly do admire their work and very happy that they are in existence and that they continue to be a strong voice in securing funding so that we can leverage it throughout all the communities with regard to volunteer services and other programs that have emerged over the course of the last 20 plus years. And again, the Michigan Nonprofit Association, I can remember when that was created, again by Russ and others, and the purposes behind that. And Dottie Johnson and Russ and others really played a role in its bringing the voice of the Michigan nonprofits together. And it started with the Grant Maker, Grant Seeker Conference. And I believe the year was like 1988 when that was birthed. And then emerged out of that were the leaders of saying, well, you know, we need to really more structure this and codify this, and it's certainly under Kyle's leadership today a very strong voice in our state. My formative years were the 1960s. And the 1960s were the emergence of the Vietnam War, civil rights, and women's rights. And I was deeply influenced by that. I will say that my parents were definitely role models. They were persons who did allow for what I would say the open discussion. They were very conservative. And I think that by the time that I hit junior high school, now known as middle school, that I was beginning, because my parents didn't influence me to the point of you must share our opinions, that I think with the war raging, which I didn't really understand all that well, but more importantly, the civil rights movement. I don't know how any person in the 1960s couldn't have been influenced by the Freedom Riders and by the struggle and Martin Luther King and the passage of the Civil Rights Act and all that stuff that was going on. And I started doing a lot of reading. And so from junior high through high school, while I was a good student in all the appropriate things, I was also a good student of really trying to feel, what does it feel like? I grew up in an affluent suburban area in Detroit. And I really wanted to understand other experiences. So I volunteered one summer, and this again wasn't because I was this naive little white girl from this suburban area. I really wanted to learn. And I volunteered for an entire summer at an elementary school in the core city of Detroit, on the east side of Detroit, when Head Start was just starting. So it tells you how long ago this was. And worked with primarily children who were from kindergarten to third grade, whose motor skills were so not developed that they needed to learn how to walk and all that. Well, I got to tell you, the teachers, the students, the parents, it was a great time to be exposed to all of that and to become friends. Not just, I'm here to help, more, I'm here to learn. That was a big moment in my life, and I knew at that time that I wanted to get involved with something that meant that I could really dig in and social change. Now, I will tell you that every student across this nation who has ever applied to college or university has to always write an essay. And how many essays start with, I want to change the world? Well, I did. And so I pursued a course of sociology, and at that time becoming a teacher, because that's what women did back in that era, something to fall back on. And I took sociology. I was fascinated by sociology. It talked about all the things that were happening. Well, the emergence of Martin Luther King, and how did that movement, it was just a fabulous time. And I knew I wanted to get involved in somehow, some way. So again, I went. And I will say I was somewhat influenced in the 7th grade. I did write a paper about the fact that I wanted to be a social worker. Where that came from, I don't know. So then I, through a variety of circumstances and all that, I got a job when I moved here to Grand Rapids. I moved here to Grand Rapids to be married, and then ultimately that didn't work out. But the career did, and I was a caseworker at the American Red Cross during what I would say the last few years of the Vietnam War. And my job was that of service to military families and veterans and disaster services. A great first job, tremendous first job. Got to know systems and problem solving and working with people. I then wanted to go on to grad school, and I did. For a couple years I took courses that as an extended degree student, and then finally had to dive in and do this full time. Well, I got this wonderful opportunity to work with Pat Babcock, who at that time was a legislative aide to Governor Milliken, and as well as a woman by the name of Pat Curran, both social workers, but in a different way, a policy way. And my degree is a master's of social work, but with a concentration in policy planning and administration, or as I say back in the day, it's the MBA of whatever. After grad school and after that wonderful internship, I became, immediately upon graduation, became an associate executive of the United Way of Kent County here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And it was a wonderful opportunity for me to really learn and to execute social planning allocations to agencies, diving into issues, understanding leadership. It was a good training ground. And I loved it. And I became the head of the planning division and had learned what it was to be the head of something, and working with other community leaders and learning about that interesting world of foundations. And I had heard and you know, worked with people, they had applied to the Kellogg Foundation. I thought, how do you do that? How do you get to know people there? And I had heard on the horizon a little bit about the Council of Michigan Foundations. But at that time, this is in the 80s, still foundations were a concept to me, not a reality. I did get to know the woman who at that time was the executive director, then known, of the Grand Rapids Foundation. Got to know also the people who were leading the Steelcase Foundation. And those were the two primary foundations in the Grand Rapids area, and getting to know them and understand them. So when Pat Edison decided to retire, and she still is a significant part of the Grand Rapids Community Foundation and truly a mentor and really a great person, I thought, well, what do I have to lose? So I applied for the job, and I got it. Well, I had a part-time secretary at the time who realized that I was going to be serious about working, and she decided that maybe she needed to do other things. And so for 6 weeks of my life, one of the most social people I know sat at the Grand Rapids Foundation and said, what am I going to do? So I will say that I poured myself into understanding the history of the foundation, wrote the history so I could have an understanding, along with two people I hired within 4 months of my coming on board, so that we could understand the culture of the foundation. And they are still with me today. Lynn Black's our CFO, and Marcia Rapp's our Vice President for Programs. I will tell you that the three of us really made that place sing within a year. And it was already singing, but and became connected to the Council of Michigan Foundations and other entities that were just like us around the state. And realized that the heart of who we are, just like Russ Mauby's heart and love, was the fact that we could do things in the community, and not to denigrate grant making, because it is at the core of who we are and what we do. But we could also do other things. We could influence policy. We could get involved in issues and be a voice at the table. Heck, we could create that community table and go out into communities, visit with neighborhood associations, understand how grant dollars are used. Well, gosh, and then along the way, how we can leverage those grant dollars with governmental dollars and how we can build those partnerships. So over the course of the last 25 years, we have grown tremendously, not out of ego, but out of, darn it all, we're going to make this work. And so I'm feeling that there's certainly a large part of me is at the core of the foundation, along with a large part of our trustees and our staff. And we have really committed and dedicated staff. So, you know, I would say that I'm really love to speak out on a variety of issues, not in a hurtful way, but in a clarifying and educational way. But my roots of philanthropy, my roots of understanding social change, go back to the little girl in the 1960s, watching television, hearing on the radio, living through the riots in the city of Detroit, and hearing the gunshots in the middle of the night, because we lived that close to the border between the suburb I lived in and the city of Detroit. And then really wanting to understand more what's going on here. And let me put myself in the place of others so I can really understand. It has taken me a number of years to be able to say that I really work arm in arm with a board of trustees. Our current board of trustees are the most tremendous leaders around, and that is not, it's not hyperbole. It really is true. And I would say in my beginning years, it was a board that didn't know how to work with the then executive director, and an executive director who had never worked with a board either. So one of the things that I learned how to do out of the chute was going to meet with individual board members. I would say that I had struggles the first 5 years of me being president of the Community Foundation, not from people not wanting to do things, but there was a power dynamic. And I would often talk to them about what is the role of the board, is policy and high-level activity. Your primary role is hiring and firing of the leader and good fiduciary responsibility and governance. But we're going to do the staff work. And this is what staff work is, and this is what board work is. And I think a breakthrough for me, frankly, was back in the late 80s and early 90s. I asked Kathy Agar to come and assist with a strategic planning process, which had never been done before, and insisted that our board members become a part of that. And I think that the board then realized that this was an entity that wasn't just about meeting every other month and making grant decisions, that there was more to this than that, and sat up and they paid attention. So my thing is that I've never taken my role for granted, and say that to my leadership all the time, that I am there as their leader, but also as the person who is their support, who listens and wants to listen. We're the executors, we're the implementers, and we certainly want to have their good insight on policy matters and major decisions, and certainly be involved with strategy development to a degree. And now the leaders on our board are people who have had the experience of being on boards, on for-profit boards and larger nonprofit boards. So it isn't a matter of telling them this is board work and this is staff work. And it's what I would say a real strong partnership. It took years to develop that partnership. And it took me of being able to have the confidence as a leader to be able to do that in a respectful manner.